Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, back again with another exciting edition of Wrestlers of the Week. Because it's Friday, gotta get down on Friday. It's my favourite time of the week. I've done my intro back to front there, but I'm alright with it, changing it up just a little bit. This week, it's been a week full of very good matches, all really on TV or on normal shows, or most of them anyway. But then next week, of course, we've got Hell in a Cell, Bound for Glory, all that sort of thing. But this week actually surprised me with its quality. There was a lot of good stuff here to talk about. So without any further ado, let's have a look at my honourable mentions. My honourable mentions this week are a tag team who I think have been very deserving for a long time, and finally this week, finally won themselves a set of tag team titles. From NXT, it's Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch, backed up, of course, by Pat McAfee. That's going to be very interesting going forwards, but generally, I'm just delighted for Burch and Lorcan. I feel like they've been brilliant for a long time, a number of years now in NXT, and I'm really glad that they won those belts, as much as I'm a fan of, various other tag teams in that division. But I feel like it's Burch and Lorcan's time, and I hope it goes on for a while. Now on to my top 10, and number 10 this week is one of the competitors who got through the first round of AEW's number one contender tournament. It's MJF's sidekick, Wardlow. Wardlow opened the tournament and indeed the show on the whole this week with a match against Jungle Boy in the first round. Your classic sort of David versus Goliath, small versus big matchup, speed versus power. A very classic formula, but one they pulled off really well. And I wasn't surprised when Wardlow won, and even though I'm a big fan of Jungle Boy, I was kind of hoping that Wardlow would go through. I'm very intrigued by this incredibly slow burn storyline between himself and MJF, which keeps creeping in between big feuds for MJF. He'll shout at Wardlow if he's lost a match or whatever, threaten him with firing, and then he'll leave his family on the streets, and really horrible heelish stuff like that. And we all are just waiting for some point in the future for Wardlow to snap and absolutely batter MJF. So I can't wait for that, but at the moment, he's focused on the tournament. Maybe if he gets eliminated from the tournament, it'll continue to heighten the tensions between the two of them. But I'm glad that he's gone through. It was a nice performance from Wardlow. Not his best match, because I think that's still the cage match with Cody, but this was still a very enjoyable effort from both men. And I enjoyed the finish with Wardlow hitting the F10 on Jungle Boy from the ramp into the ring, then a second finisher as well in the ring just to make sure, and then the academic pinfall. Number 9, someone else from the tournament, and somebody who lost in the first round, but I think someone who put in a very, very good performance even though they were defeated. It's Boom Boom, Colt Cabana, Dark Order edition. Colt took on Hangman Adam Page in the first round, a very crucial matchup because of course Hangman is one of the favourites to win the tournament alongside, I'd suggest, probably Kenny Omega. I think they're probably going to meet in the final, right? But Cabana here had to, I think, make things look difficult for Hangman, and did that with flying colours. The match lasted a long time, which I think was the right decision, drawing a parallel between Omega winning his match in seconds against Sonny Kiss, and on the other hand, you've got Hangman struggling and taking a long time to beat Colt. I do think it was Colt's best match actually in AEW so far. I think it was really, really good. You often forget because he's so comedic, or recently so much of a character guy generally. Even though he's now a bit evil, he's still primarily seen as a character sort of wrestler rather than a competitor in the ring, I suppose. But he certainly can do that when the situation calls for it. And I really liked a lot of elements of this match, particularly all the reversals that Cabana pulled out, his evading of the buckshot lariat attempts towards the end, and then eventually falling for the final one, which put a really nice button on the end of the match. It was a really good little performance from Cabana, and I hope he gets more of a chance to do this sort of thing in the future. Very good stuff, and 2 points for Mr. Colt. Mr. Colt, Mr. Cabana, what am I talking about? Number 8, time to talk about New Japan. Right, so this year's G1 Climax, I feel has been a little bit underwhelming. There have been fantastic matches in the G1, of course, there are every year, but I don't think they've came in as much volume, and they haven't been the same sort of groundbreaking level that we're always used to in the G1 every year. This year's been a little bit disappointing, but there have still been major storyline developments. One of those happened last week, just within the cutoff point for this week's Wrestlers of the Week, as we saw this week's number 8, Will Ospreay, turn heel. Finally, the story was that finally Ospreay beat Kazuchika Okada, his stable leader, after many, many attempts and always coming up just a little bit short against Okada. No shame in that, of course, from a character point of view, because Okada's the top dog, sort of, still in the company. He's like I guess if you did a power ranking of everybody, even though he's not got the belt, Okada's still probably the hardest man to beat in all of New Japan. But Ospreay did manage to beat him in the G1 last weekend, and did so in a surprising way, with the help of not only his girlfriend Bea Priestley, but also with the Great O'Khan, who he encountered, previously at Rev Pro when O'Khan was on excursion, and everyone seems to have turned heel, and it looks like Ospreay's setting up his own stable. So very intriguing developments there in New Japan. I don't know how I feel about it really, but it was a big win for Ospreay, hence the 3 points this week. But I don't know where this is going to go. It's another faction to consider, I suppose, a mini faction at the moment. It might grow. And New Japan has a lot of factions already. Bullet Club, LIJ, Chaos, who am I missing out? Suzuki Gun, for example. And I wonder if there's room for another faction on the sort of New Japan landscape. But we'll see where it goes. I'm sure it's going to lead to some kind of big feud or storyline down the road, maybe against Okada. Maybe they'll face each other in a rematch at Wrestle Kingdom. Who knows? But for now, Will Ospreay gets 3 points. Number 7 this week is a man who reached the final of the G1 Climax and lost. But it was still a big effort from him. I think he still exceeded a lot of expectations in reaching the final. And that man is Sonata. Sonata was a man who I saw actually before the tournament began, touted by a lot of websites as the favourite to win the whole thing. I assume thereby setting up some kind of Naito versus Sonata clash, like a sort of stable derby between two friends. But that didn't happen. Sonata, of course, had to beat Evil in the sort of the crescendo, the climax of his G1 Climax block, the B block. I thought Evil might win, but Evil and Naito have already clashed a few times. They've exchanged the belt back and forth. So maybe it was right that Sonata won and went on to the final. The reason I thought Evil was going to win was because it would have set up a heel versus face encounter in the final. Instead, we got face versus face, but it still worked to a decent level. Sonata's match with Evil wasn't the best match from either man in terms of pure action. Evil's matches have really gone downhill since he turned heel because he relies a lot on interference from his stablemates. At the same time though, I think on an emotional level, it was perfectly fine. Everybody willing Sonata forwards to beat his former friend, his former tag partner of course as well, his co-tag team champion in the past, and progress to the finals, which Sonata did. And for quite a few years now, people have been talking about when is Sonata going to get his push to the main event scene, because he's full of potential, he's full of promise, he's got a great look, etc, etc. He seems to have all the makings of a big major star in the heavyweight division, but we might have to wait a little bit longer. That's because in the final, of course, Sonata came up short. It was a good final, it was a good match. It wasn't the best G1 final in recent memory. Last year's was better, the years before that was better. It was the weakest one in a while, but that doesn't mean it was a bad match. And in the context of this week, it was certainly worthy of some Wrestlers of the Week points. Number 6, let's all just take a second and breathe with the switchblade, because number 6 is Jay White. Jay White, I was worried for him when COVID first happened and a lot of people were stuck outside of Japan, couldn't get back to wrestle for New Japan, and Jay White was one of them. And I was worried because Evil had jumped to Bullet Club, that Evil was going to become the top dog in Bullet Club and Jay White was going to fall really far down the pecking order in New Japan. Instead, upon his return, Jay has seemed to kind of just hit his stride again without any real loss of momentum, and credit to him for that. This past week, even though he didn't make the final, and I actually thought he probably would make the final, but my predictions were all over the place. I had no idea what was going on in this year's G1. But I feel like White was part of the emotional high point of the tournament, maybe even more so than the final. And it's weird because the match in the A block on the final night didn't even contain anybody who reached the final. It was White versus Ishii, and if White had won, he would have made the final, but he bottled it and he lost, which meant that, of course, Ibushi made the final. The fact that Jay White took part in such a great match, which actually ended up having no long-term consequences for either man, I think goes a long way to demonstrate how good of a heel he is. He got everybody invested in just wanting to see him lose, which is the purest thing you can do as a heel. People wanted to see him fail, not get to the final, and I think he did a really good job of milking that and playing that up to the crowd. I think that Jay White's one of the best losers in wrestling, if that makes any sense. You just love to see him lose because he's so detestable. And I think it's really, really good stuff. So Jay White picks up another little handful of points on this week's Wrestlers of the Week. And I'm pleased for him, the way that he's managed to keep this momentum going after his return to the promotion. Number 5 this week, oh, here we go. It's one of my favorite wrestlers around today. It's Hangman Adam Page. Hangman, as I mentioned, took part in this match against Cabana on Dynamite and had to really struggle to beat him and even just get through the first round. One of Hangman's best attributes, I think, in an opposite way to Kenny Omega, isn't destroying his opponents. It's fighting his opponents, struggling, battling, and then coming out on top. Kind of in a sort of a similar way to Jon Moxley. But whereas Moxley often adapts his game during this title reign to beat his opponents, Hangman kind of perseveres. Although there was a little bit of intelligence, a little bit of adapting in this match against Cabana with the whole buckshot lariat fake out. Cabana turned to avoid it, and then he hit him with it while Cabana was out of rhythm. Really enjoyed that little finish there. It showed that Hangman's really dialed in, and I am excited for him to get to the final and lose, because that's what I think is going to happen. Yeah, I just feel like Hangman's going to reach that final and get screwed by Omega, and then we're going to have mega heel Omega, which we're almost at that point anyway right now, and super babyface Hangman. I think we'll then be made to wait a long time until Hangman gets his hands on that AEW World Championship, but I think it'll come. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if we don't take into account like injury and wrestling being shut down and all that, anything that could, happen in the future. So Hangman gets a load of points here for what was, for my money, the second best match of the first round of the tournament. Now let's talk about the best match in the first round of the tournament as we move on to number 4, Penta El Zero Miedo. Zero M, Pentagon, Junior, Penta, that guy. When I saw that the first round matchup was Penta versus Phoenix, I got excited. I was like, yes, this is going to be good. I love the Lucha Bros as a tag team. They've been one of the highlights of AEW's first year on television, but at the same time, I feel like one of the things, AEW have kind of sacrificed their singles ability to have a really good tag team. And it's a trade-off, you've got to take one without the other, I suppose. But Penta got a chance to show what he can do once again, remind us all what a fantastic singles wrestler he is in this match against Phoenix. And obviously, because they're brothers and because they've wrestled each other numerous times, Penta and Phoenix had unbelievable chemistry in this match. The match really wowed a lot of people. It was a match that could have easily slotted into a really good pay-per-view and not looked out of place at all. It was an exceptional match for TV, especially just in the middle of a show as well. It kind of came out of nowhere, and I think everybody really enjoyed it. And at one stage, Penta hits a move that I don't think I've ever seen before. I might have done, but I can't remember. Certainly not, maybe Ricochet's done it once, but I can't remember off the top of my head ever seeing this before. That move came when Phoenix hit the ropes, ran back towards Penta, and Penta did a backdrop, but instead of backdropping him backwards, he flicked him up, and Penta did like a flip in midair, and then he powerbombed him on the way down, and I was like, oh, Penta, you naughty little boy. Also, all of the things were included that make a Penta match so unique and fun. The arm breaking or arm wrenching spot, I suppose. It didn't break his opponent's arm in this instance. That was really effective, of course. Obviously, the chopping the ring post accidentally when your opponent ducks, that was really good as well. Some chops that found their mark also, which sounded brutal too. Yeah, Penta's got a real unique pacing and style about his singles matches that make him unlike any other wrestler in the world. And they're usually awesome. The only sad thing for me is that Penta lost and he's out of the tournament. But when you lose to somebody as talented as Phoenix, you can't have your cake and eat it. One of them's going to go through to the next round, one of them's not. And even though I'd love to have seen both of them progress, it was just never going to happen, was it? Next up, number 3, the Stone Pitbull, Tomohiro Ishii. Despite me saying that the G1 Climax has been a little bit disappointing this year, I feel like once again, Ishii has been the MVP of the tournament, probably the most consistent guy once again. There's been a few challenges to that title, I suppose. People like Naito had a good tournament, Ibushi had a good tournament, but I feel like the most consistent person once again was the Stone Pitbull. And he's no spring chicken either. He is wrestling rings around these younger guys. And it all culminated in kind of the emotional high point of the A block with this final match that I've already talked about against Jay White on the final night of the A block, with Ishii picking up the win, sending the Switchblade packing, and denying him the chance to get to the final. Ishii's the perfect person in that role, this kind of immovable object that you have to defeat somehow to get to the final, and in the end Jay White couldn't do it by hook or by crook. He tried to cheat, Gato tried to get involved, and Ishii overcame it all. The only problem is that Ishii didn't go to the final either, and I want him to win that belt once, just once. Can we make Ishii an IWGP Heavyweight Champion? He cannot retire from wrestling without having been IWGP Heavyweight Champion at least once. Please, God, can we just let it happen? Next up, number 2, now onto the actual winner of this year's G1 Climax A block and the winner of this year's G1 Climax, Kota Ibushi. Ibushi has won the tournament for the 2nd year in a row. He's got to the final for the 3rd year in a row. The first time he lost to Tanahashi, then he beat Jay White, then he beat Sonata this year. I think that was the right choice, not to diss Sonata or anything. I just feel like having Ibushi win this again and get another title shot at Wrestle Kingdom, assuming he holds on to that briefcase, I think that was the right call. Ibushi had a curious couple of days towards the end of the tournament. He had that match with Tai Chi, which was Just a lot of leg kicks, it seemed to be. I don't know, it was a weird match. It was certainly a unique one anyway. It broke up the card, but it wasn't like a standout match of the week or anything. But the final against Sonata did deliver, and I just have to recognise what a huge achievement winning the G1 Climax is, which is why Ibushi's getting 9 points this week. He's very good at winning wrestling matches. He's got one of the best babyface fiery comebacks in the world, maybe the best in the world at that right now. And that's why I kind of thought Evil was going to win the B block, as I mentioned earlier, because then Ibushi would have a heel to overcome. Instead, he had a very technical, very wily babyface, maybe a tweener, but a babyface in the form of Sonata, which was good. It was a good match between two of the most stylish men in New Japan Pro Wrestling, but I just wanted to see him vanquish a heel opponent, if that makes sense. But nevertheless, he delivered. It was a good match, and of course, any time that we're guaranteed more big Ibushi matches in the future, I'm pretty happy with that, because he delivers on the big stage pretty much without fail. So congratulations, Kota Ibushi, you are number 2 in this week's Wrestlers of the Week, but you're not number 1, and I'll tell you who is right now. This week's number 1 and my Wrestler of the Week, for the second time ever, not this year, he hasn't been it this year, but he is now, it's Rey Fénix. Fénix was actually voted a Cultaholic's Wrestler of the Year in the Culty Awards last year, wasn't he? I didn't vote for him, but at the same time, I can recognise why Ross nominated him, because he's well good. I think that part of the problem was that he was always in tag team matches, where it's a bit harder to stand out. Whereas this year, maybe, we'll start to see him towards the tail end of 2020, maybe branch out and be a bit more of a singles guy. I hope so anyway. Not the takeaway from the Lucha Bros, love them as a tag team, but Fénix is, no pun intended, dynamite in the ring. And that was a game proven this week with a monster victory over his brother. I've already talked about the unique spot with the backdrop and everything. I should probably mention the scariness of the Hurricane Rana spot out the corner when it looked like Fénix may have landed on his head. He was shaken up for a good minute or so, but then appeared to just magically recover like a superhuman and just wrestle the rest of the match flawlessly. It was quite something to behold. So it turns out Fénix isn't just one of the best high flyers around, he's also one of the toughest wrestlers around as well. I couldn't believe that he shook that off. Hopefully, of course, the most important thing is that he's okay. Apparently reports have suggested that he's been telling everyone that he's okay, and he certainly seemed to be okay in the closing stages of that match, reversing Penta's finisher into a destroyer out of nowhere to pick up a pinfall and a victory. Fénix, of course, moves on to the next round against Kenny Omega, but at the same time, there are still question marks over his health right now. So that match may happen, it may be delayed, maybe something else will happen. We don't really know at this moment in time. But I feel as though they will have that match at some point, because they've promised it, and even if they don't have it next week, they'll probably do it in the future. We've seen that match before, of course, where Fénix and Kenny Omega feuded over the AAA Mega Championship. And they have great chemistry together, really good stuff. So do Omega and Pentagon, of course. We saw that at All In, but that feels like a long time ago now. But I feel like Fénix might be the one to really push Omega to another 5-star match in AEW as well. But anyway, for a wonderful match this week, stealing the show alongside his brother in the middle of Dynamite in that tournament, my Wrestler of the Week is Fénix. Now let's take a look at that lovely little league table and see where things stand. So as we can see, Cody is still top and Moxley and Shingo are still in joint second place. Now I thought by the end of the G1 that one of the Japanese wrestlers would be top by this point, but instead, maybe because the G1's been a little bit disappointing, we still see the AEW guys rule the roost for now. As we move a little bit further down, we'll see the likes of Hangman Adam Page, of course, who's got some big matches in store in that tournament. The next one against Wardlow. Kota Ibushi, the winner of the G1 Climax, is there, joined with Hiromu Takahashi in 15th place, and it's a big week next week, so I think we'll have to see what happens after Hell in a Cell, of course, and Impact, remember, on Saturday night have Bound for Glory. And that is it for this week's Wrestlers of the Week. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Stay safe out there, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.